My name is Akemi Chan Imai, and I'm the program manager at the Ohlone Asian Cultural Center. And our mission is to build vibrant communities through API arts and cultural programs that foster intergenerational and cross-cultural dialogue, understanding, collaboration, and social justice. So before we get into this program, I wanted to now hand it off to Kanyon to lead us in a land acknowledgement.
Mishmin Tuhis, Countercot Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers-Roods. I come from Indian Canyon Nation, the only federally recognized Indian country in the Bay Area, and being the daughter of Anne Marie Sayers, I recognize my privilege in being raised on the land of my ancestors, and I recognize the privilege that I have been raised in a both traditional and intertribal environment, where land acknowledgements and culture sharing is an opportunity that all of us learn cultural protocols, indigenous protocols, is becoming familiar with the people and the histories of the land that we are on. Currently, I am a nomadic native. I was just in Rumsey and Ohlone territory, and I currently am traversing through Mutsu and Ohlone territory, and my office destination is in Tammy and Ohlone territory. And so I'm trying to settle myself because I have a couple of hiccups and it might ruin the song. My mother believes that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. So I want to offer a grandmother's song to honor our grandmothers, their grandmothers, and in all Mother Earth. For without them and without her, we would not be here. We share this time and space together for a reason. So it's with that humility, that present-mindedness, that I offer this song here with all of you. And I'm going to use my regalia because Native people don't wear costumes. And this is Kanyon's grandmother's song. Moi moi o kana, moi moi o ka, moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o na o kanale, moi moi o kanale. Moi moi o kawan, oh moi moi o ko, moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o na o kanale, moi moi o kanale, moi moi o kawan. Moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o na o kanale, moi moi o kanale. Oh, what a big oh! Thank you for acknowledging the land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanyon. Now I want to hand it off to Rucha, if you would like to introduce your film and then also get the film started.
Thank you so much, Akemi, for this invitation, and a huge thank you to the Ohlone Asian Cultural Center for inviting us in on this very, very special day. I'm also in unceded Ohlone lands in Huchin and Oakland. Yeah, I'm excited to introduce this film. This is actually my first film. I'm a photojournalist and an emerging filmmaker. And, you know, I always start by saying that I'm born and raised in India, and I'm given to understand that Christopher Columbus was actually looking for my people, right? He was headed towards South Asia, and he got lost by thousands of miles. And then he also got lost ethically, morally, spiritually. And this film really is an homage to Indigenous women right here on this land where I live currently, who have been fighting and resisting and advocating for truth and history for centuries. Um, so I'm a photojournalist, and I'm really interested in counter narratives of women of color, of social movements, particularly in the face of a very Eurocentric, ethnocentric lens, which we know erases a lot of stories, a lot of histories. And as I started to get more grounded in living in the Bay Area, living in Ohlone territory, I realized that as an immigrant who was born and raised in another part of the world, that there were so many narratives and stories and histories that I had no clue about. And it was only when my photojournalism led me, my work was very international, but I also felt like, wow, we need to really connect the dots, you know, what is unfolding here and connect the dots with what's happening globally. And I heard Anne-Marie Sayers speak at the David Brower Center a few years ago, and I was really deeply moved and blown away by her work for decades, the sanctuary that she has created in Indian Canyon and Hollister for all Native people to reclaim their ceremonies, their tradition, a place that means so much in terms of healing. And after I met her, I asked her if I could potentially explore a photo essay. So I went to the Indian Canyon in 2015 when there was drought in California. And it was very clear when I was entering the Indian Canyon that, wow, not only was I entering a different world, but was entering a very different worldview. And a few years later, this idea of a film came along, and I had a conversation with Anne-Marie to see if she would be interested in collaborating, and she said yes. I mean, I think the film really is an exploration and a hope for a conversation for those of us who are not indigenous to this land. And as an immigrant, you know, there's a very strong assimilation narrative, right? That this narrative of the American dream, and the question that I have been asking as a photojournalist and as someone who lives here is, what is the narrative that is normalized by the dominant culture, right? Who profits and benefits from that normalization? And what is the inner work that is needed for me to unpack these narratives, right? Of colonialism, of American exceptionalism, of the American dream, and then really committing to understanding the history right here and learning and listening from the incredible organizing that's happening by Indigenous women. Of course, there's Kanyon, there's Anne-Marie Sayers, and right here we have Corina Gold, who's leading the work with Segura Tia Land Trust, the first native-led land trust, and all the effort to reclaim the Berkeley Shell Mound. So I think this film is really an offering to start a conversation and to help us think like, oh, how can we listen and learn from the leadership of Native women right here, right? What does that solidarity look like? And I'm happy to share a little bit more after we watch the film. So is it okay to see the film now?
I can feel the ancestors dancing when they connect with the ceremonies that are taking place in Indian Canyon. We've always been here since the beginning of time. Today is the best time for an Ohlone person to be alive since contact, because the ancestral spirits are starting to wake a lot of people up. My name is Anne-Marie Sayers. I live in Indian Canyon in Hollister, California. And it is the only federally recognized Indian country for 350 miles along coastal California. This is Ohlone territory, which extends from San Francisco to Big Sur, from the Pacific Ocean to the Mount Diablo Range. Between 1887 and 1905, 91 million acres of Indian-owned land disappeared for the people coming west. To say you were Indian was suicidal. And when you have a Native woman watch her husband get killed, her son get killed, she is going to tell her daughter, say you are Mexican for sheer survival. During the gold rush, there were bounties on the heads of indigenous people in California. In 1854, the U.S. government paid $5 a head for California Native peoples. The resulting genocide and diseases killed nearly 95% of all California natives by 1880. California, indeed, is a golden state, but reality dictates that the foundation of California, the foundation of this entire country, is built on lies and deaths of Indians. The California mission system forced the Ohlone people into servitude and set the stage for the destruction of our culture. When the Native peoples who did not like the restrictions at the mission would run away, Indian Canyon served as a safe haven. We are right in the heart of the Gavilan Mountain Range. You had to be very intimate with the area to find the canyon. Cienega Road means swamp. Ohlone people who were able to navigate into the canyon were safe during the bounty era. When I realized the American Indian did not get the right to practice their religion freely until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. And I was horribly upset. And so I opened up my great-grandfather's trust allotment to all indigenous people whom are in need of traditional lands for ceremony. I am so happy you were here. There are a number of Ohlone descendants that have not healed. There's still anger there. And we have 9 sweat lodges, and I offer them to start participating in ceremony. And I'm watching slowly healing taking place. And for me, that's a reason for living. We still truly respect and honor our ancestors, particularly with all the development that has taken place in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Indian Canyon is sacred. You are surrounded by all the natural elements around you. I was born and raised here. My umbilical cord is buried here in this canyon. So I will always be connected. My daughter's umbilical cord is buried here in this canyon. She will always be connected. My mother, Elena, was an extremely proud Native American woman. And she, too, lived to honor her ancestors. My mother believed when ceremonies stop, so does the earth. I want our mother, the earth, to continue. Because when she decides to shake us off, she can do so with no difficulty. Water is the blood of the earth. In our language, water is Ramah, and there is no word in the English language that describes the definition of Ramah. Ramah is just not H2O. It's a movement of the water. It's a sound of the water. It's a creek that contains the water. They are one and inseparable. And if you take the time to listen, you can actually hear the water talk to you, whisper to you. It's just taking the time to listen. 2 years ago, I was one of the initial signatories to get on the ballot So the people can decide if we want a fracking or not in San Benito County. And it was 16-1. The oil company spent to every $1 that we were able to raise, and we won. It made national news, and there is no fracking now in San Benito County, which I'm so happy to say. I want to see truth in history. All lenses should be shared, not just a European lens. Non-Native people can learn a lot from the Native peoples that are still alive, that are still living on their lands, in a manner that is respectful.
We have a gesture of reciprocity and respect and altruism. As people of the land, when we give of ourselves, it will come back.
What I find so amazing is the Native peoples coming together, because then you can go forward with success. My daughter went to Standing Rock, and it was truly, truly amazing to see so many different cultures, so many different nations coming together. And that has to continue to go forward.
So I encourage you to pass this around so you can smell it, because it's very, very aromatic.
I would like Indian Canyon to continue the educating the youth. When they connect with the earth, it is magic. I share with them that each and every one of you are going to be in a position that you're going to be making very, very important decisions. Before you make a decision, ask yourself, how will this affect 7 generations in the future? When you answer that question, then make your decision. I love being alive today and seeing all the Native peoples really embrace their culture.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rucha. I've watched it before, but it's always a powerful experience to see it again. So now I wanted to invite Rucha and also Kanyon to just have a conversation, what's on your mind? What's on your mind as we watch this in these times? What is relevant and important for us to take away, and more?
Pardon my audio, as I am at the tail end of my nomadic journey. I'm just a nomadic native, so hopefully the audio is clear for you, and then you'll see my bright and shining face in just a few moments. But I'm here and I'm listening, and I'm honored to see Rucha's smiling face. These pandemic times are so challenging. So Rucha, there are so many times people are so surprised that wow, Indian Canyon is there and real. And so I never try and speak for you, but I just love how you just shared like what truly motivated you to make this film. So thank you.
Of course, no, thank you for the invitation. And it was such an amazing honor to be in your traditional land and to learn from your mother and to listen to your stories and perspective. And I just feel like in this time of profound converging crisis, the wildfires, the political crisis, the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, and just what the statement from the White House today on Columbus Day, it just shows that these macroaggressions of this idea of the US are so real. And the fact that, when we think of a sustainable pathway forward, we really need to reflect on what happened and just acknowledge what happened in the past right here. When I came to the US, like the gold rush was so romanticized, and I had no idea that there were literally government sanctioned bounties. Um, and I'm always thinking, like, what is California going to do? Yes, Gavin Newsom has issued an apology, but in terms of actual practice and in terms of actual actions, what does that really look like? um, I mean, I'm really hoping that, we all just take in like our part and self-reflect and sort of work from within and then be out. That's really my hope. um, yeah. And, I just wanted to mention that the Indian Collective has a whole land back movement happening right now, a land back campaign. So if you just Google on social media hashtag land back, they have 4 very clear asks of allies on what it means to participate in this movement of giving the land back. So I think that's the other thing that comes to my mind. And Kanyon, I really want to hear from you. What advice and what wisdom do you have to share during this time, which is, it can be really paralyzing almost. And I think that is the design of the oppressive forces, is to paralyze us to submission, because the crises are second by second, minute by minute. And I think the question I have for you is, how do we sort of stay present with what is happening right here in Ohlone territory?
Well, what I find really important is education, honoring truth and history. From as simple as, my mother has a nonprofit organization that's called Coast to Know in Indian Research, and that word is a misnomer that identifies the people. The Spaniards called us costaños, and that word evolved into academic jargon called coast to knowing. It's how the language is identified. It's how a few other things are identified. And then even when it comes to Ohlone being a term that identifies the Bay Area, that is a misnomer. The indigenous peoples that have ancestry here in the Bay Area since time immemorial did not use that word to identify themselves before the 1800s. There's a singular village called Ohlone, and there were people from there, and that's by San Gregorio. However, Ohlone people, it's just a term to identify Bay Area in, or Silicon Valley in. The same way that we say, you're from the Bay Area? Oh, like, where are you from? Palo Alto, San Martin, San Jose, San Mateo. Doesn't tell you exactly where. And the interesting part about education is there are 8 languages, 8 separate language dialects of this territory. And in California, there's over 90 languages and over 200 plus language dialects. And the way I see it is that there's different language dialects. That means that there are different creation stories, different practices and protocols, different governing systems. And so when it comes to when people try and voice what truth is, are we acknowledging the many perspectives? Accountable to recognize that if there aren't some people in the room, if there aren't some stories and narratives that ever have been acknowledged, what education are we being briefed on? And so when I talk about education, well, if you're going to be talking about indigenous peoples, nothing about us without us is one of my core quotes that I like to use. And many people before me have used that quote, but I guess I'm getting pretty loud about it. I'm almost at my destination. So education is really important to me. I started a business called Kanyon Consulting, and my tagline is having conversations about bridging the gap between indigenous and contemporary value systems. And I believe that we can strategize sustainable futures in any organization, in any business, when leaning to indigenous pedagogy. However, it means that all these organizations should honor and acknowledge indigenous protocol. That means become familiar with the native peoples, histories, and knowledge of the land. If you want to look to the health of the land, look to the indigenous peoples. oh, you can't find them. Do you think your land's healthy? Are the health of the indigenous peoples healthy? Is that land really healthy? So yeah, I try and just say education. And this is roaming alone. I'll talk about him later in a minute. I'm so close to my destination, I swear.
I think one of the things that was so clear to me when I first visited the Indian Canyon in 2015 was this web of relationships, and that everything in the canyon and obviously your work and your mom's work is so predicated on honoring those webs of relationships, of course, to your ancestors and your community, but also to nature, to the water, to the trees. And I remember one of the things that she had said to me was, you know, before you take something from nature, which means every day of our life, our whole existence, we are taking something from nature, you know. It's like she always says, like, you ask for permission and then you say thank you, you know. And that to me was so simple and yet so profound, because we just forget, like when I should speak for myself, like, you know. And I was just curious, like, if you can share something to us about being in relationship, because I feel like this time is so much about fragmentation and separation, and there's so much othering and so much dehumanization on a daily basis. Politically, we're seeing like entire communities, people just being dehumanized on a daily basis, you know. And to me it seems like that's where the profound disconnect is from each other and nature. So can you share a little bit about that, like what does it mean to be in relationship?
Well, how my mother voices it and how I like to say, it's so very important that we acknowledge that we impact not only ourselves, but our environment, and the decisions we make also have an impact. And that ripple effect shouldn't only just be considered on how our actions impact us, like, you know, action reaction, but how our actions impact our environment and the next generations. Now, what I like to do is I visit classrooms and talk to third and fourth graders. And I like to joke, I get to talk to kids about genocide. And it's true. And what I do is I say, how many of you are omnivores? And a handful of people raise their hand. And I say, how many of you are vegetarian or vegan? And between 7 to 13% will usually raise their hand, depending on the area, community. However, I ask that and I say, did you know that you have to take a life, or at least impact a life, to sustain your own? When we recognize and acknowledge that the plants and the animals, they were here before us, and they are, in my culture and in indigenous stories that I hear, they're acknowledged as the first people, and humans are, we came last. We were given the responsibility to be good stewards of the land and to be caretakers. And so I say you have to take a life, or at least impact a life dramatically, to sustain your own. Are we being accountable? Are we acknowledging that? Because like many people might, a lot of people that I know say, if you've ever hauled your own water, if you ever had to take care of your own water, either pump it or haul it, you recognize ways that you shouldn't waste. Like you are accountable. And so if we started thinking about being in right relation with the environment and these plant lives, we would recognize the impact that it takes for us, for our lives to be sustained, to be accountable, to recognize, oh, wow, this pineapple that doesn't grow here had to be shipped over here, and this much petroleum, this much effort to get to me so I could benefit from it. And what drives me nuts is when people don't like a little, when an apple falls on the ground and they don't like a little bruise. And I'm sitting here like, nature, nature, calm down. You could wipe it off, you could polish it off, calm down. So to be accountable, to be in seasons, to recognize that all of these living systems, we impact that. And to attempt to be in right relation is to take steps towards decolonization and re-indigenization. And when I say that, decolonization is questioning why we do what we do, why the rules are set the way they currently are, why the patterns are, to possibly deconstruct and destruct how we recognize why we're doing these things. And then re-indigenize is bringing these
pedagogies and these teachings that we learned from our elders and our aunties and the past generations, bringing them into modern day life. I'll use a little example of, like, many of us are familiar with Keurig and those Q cups. And that individual who created that quick, instantaneous, instant gratification creation did not factor in waste management or any form of sustainable strategy. And it's heart-wrenching to realize that's a single use and we don't have anywhere for it to go. If we actually cared about the earth and cared about our strategies, we would put into place steps and ways for appreciating the earth. Like, any new business would have to have an acknowledgement of the rights of nature and United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, and sustainable practices. So if you're going to create something new, what kind of carbon offset is it also producing? What type of waste management strategy do you have? And are you being accountable to your mess? Many indigenous cultures say, leave a place as nice as or better than you found it. And that is because from our culture, we have a responsibility and an obligation to care about how we impact the world and how our community is in community with all living systems. And what I tend to say, the Western settler colonial mindset is entitled. It thinks it deserves. It's entitled to enterprise off of capitalizing things. Oh, look at this field of this wonderful greenery. I can turn a profit, or I deserve to do this, or I deserve to do that. And it's like entitlement versus obligation and responsibility. So that's the energy I come from when I think about being accountable and being in community and kind of that approach. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kanyon. I'm not seeing anyone's faces on videos, and I totally understand it's Monday evening. But if you are willing to unmute yourself, we would just love to hear, like, how did the film land on you? Did anything surprise you? Any takeaways? Is any brave human being happy to unmute and share your perspective?
Hi there. I wish it were longer. I was surprised it was only less than 9 minutes, but it was great.
Yes, I know. I thought a lot about the timing and how long or short it should be. And the 8.5 minutes, I felt like Anne-Marie had just so to the point and made her message so clear. It was very profound 8.5 minutes. But yeah, that's the question. And I also really believe in the power of shorts. Like, I think documentary shorts can really say a lot in a few. I'm seeing another question. Will it be available to watch? Yes. If you would like to host any online screenings, it's unfortunate we can't meet in person anymore, but in your community centers, schools, with your families, we are always open to more screenings. And the video link is available on YouTube because the film was screened on KQED. So you're welcome to share.
It's on mine. I stole KQED's video.
Yeah. And Kanyon, I shouldn't speak on Canyon's behalf, but every time we've done screenings with children and Kanyon, it's next level. Because yeah, so so far we've had around, I don't even know, Kanyon, like 30 community screenings in schools, community centers, museums, churches, people's homes. Yeah. Let's see.
And the beautiful part about that is, like, even though in certain rules with screenings, like, there's these practices and procedures of legalities of sharing or not sharing, and the effort is to share the wealth, to share the teachings, to share the conversations, and to share the connection and the networks. And so, like, from as simple as my mom's nonprofit is Costanoan Indian Research. I have a business called Kanyon Consulting LLC, and I do consultation.
And we are the Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Costano and Ohlone people, and deserve to be consulted when issues around our territory are impacted. I am a cultural and Native American monitor around our cultural resources. So it's important that truth and history is honored in any which way. So I try and provide educational materials, and then any contributions really go to the work that's being handled. It's amazing like how much people take advantage of, well, resources, from as simple as when people are profiting off of the world. Where does that profit go? Most of the time it tends to be like self-centered, or you know, self-grandizing to boast and brag how we're showing up in the world. Many indigenous communities that I work with and work around are on a shoestring budget, and so we love to share the wealth. And the majority of the time, people of lower income or lower opportunities like that, like when people have the least, they tend to share the most because they know what it's like. So I also want to let people know that we do this work no matter what. And so through kindness and gestures of connection and networking, beautiful things can happen. Amazing things can happen. So opportunities arise. And I'm parking.
Absolutely. So Canyon's website is, I just put a link to her, Canyon Consulting website. Let's see, there's a question. It says, I understand that the Bay Area is also situated on Ramaytush land. Are these descendants still here? Is that even accurate to categorize as a tribe? As I learned from Canyon that Ohlone is not accurate. So Canyon, do you want to answer that?
Yes. So the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone People is an organization that acknowledges the first occupants, the first original peoples of the Bay Area in San Francisco. IRO, and it's ramaytush.com is a educational link and resource. And so Ramaytush is the language dialect of the peoples. And then I know two descendants of the Outer Mai territory, which is tad south of San Francisco proper, and Elder Greg Castro, who also is Selenian and Rumstian and Ramaytush, and Chairman Jonathan Cordero, who is an academic and ironically has relatives, indigenous lineages from Santa Barbara as well, so further down south for educational teaching purposes. So there are living Ramaytush relatives amongst us. And then East Territory is the Chichenyo language dialect territory, and within that territory is the Confederated Villages of Lashan, led by Karina Gould. There's Himrin of the Baymiwak, Karkin, Chichenyo relatives, Ruth Orta, and a lot of her family. And then there is the Muwekma tribe, who proclaim ancestry and the descendants that have ties to Mission Dolores, Mission in Fremont, and in Santa Clara. However, when it comes to us acknowledging our territories, it's important that our community members recognize that, like, I have ancestors buried in Rumstian Ohlone territory, but I know that they are Mutsun. And so we have ties all over the Bay Area. And all of us who are working really, really hard to honor truth and history all have that focus on our mind, and we do our best to be of assistance and aid to our communities and our communities' priorities. So there are quite a few communities that are active in the Bay Area, and each of them have unique priorities, and I love and support as many of them as I can. So I attempt to be accountable and recognize the territories I'm in whenever I visit. And even if I get into contracts or agreements, because I'm a consultation organization, and when I get into agreements, I let the organization know that I may be a consultant, you're the one who's doing the work. I could offer insight of the lived experience as a California Indigenous person. However, I do not speak for the Native peoples of that territory. I also want these agreements to be living documents.
in case the indigenous peoples of the territory ever want to change the verbiage or the context or the content. And then if someone wants to acknowledge the land that they're in, how are they acknowledging it? Are they just doing a tokenistic kind of like, oh, we're acknowledging we're on this land, la-di-da, look at us, we're so inclusive? Or are you really accounting for how much you benefit off of stolen land? And what are you doing about it? If you're just acknowledging it and then shooing it off, is that really acknowledgement? And so how is one leveraging their position? Are you in a position of educating the public, like the academic realm or a theater realm? Do you have space? Are you a small farm? Are you offering sliding scale to indigenous and brown people who have been systemically marginalized and disenfranchised? Are you honoring truth and history on an ongoing basis and leveraging your perspective or to your audience, the voice of the native peoples of the land? So let's say someone's in San Francisco and the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone Peoples have an announcement. Well, if people are in solidarity with the native peoples of the land, wouldn't you hope or want to think that the people who say they're in solidarity would want to also announce the call out by the native peoples of the land? And so I want to make sure that if I get into any agreements with organizations, that we work on what that kind of agreement looks like, and that I can only offer as much insight as I can, as well as how important it is that we take steps to be in right relation with the native peoples. At the same time, native peoples make up only 2% of the population, and there's a lot of organizations that want our attention. And so there will be times that native peoples may be busy, and a lot of people are like wanting instant gratification. What do I do? What do I do? All right, take steps. Take steps in honoring truth and history. Learn about the history of the land. Learn about the laws and the treaties of California. Learn how the land was taken from indigenous peoples. It's out there. It's out there. And so I just want to remind people that if you can't attempt to be in right relation with the native peoples because they're busy, don't stop your journey there. Don't stop there. Like, take steps. Let's all be in community together. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I know that was about Ramaytush, but I went all out.
Kanyon, you're getting a lot of compliments on chat. Thank you, Kanyon, for educating. Yeah, and connecting. Golden Oak Montessori said connecting acknowledgement with action is so crucial. Thank you to OACC. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Akemi, the best. Absolute angel. Thank you so much. So, you know, Kanyon, one of the things that comes up is how does one show up, right? And is there an invitation? Because sometimes that invitation is also important. And the thing is, right now, there is just so much visionary, incredible work that is happening in the Bay Area right here in Ohlone territory, led by Indigenous women. So can you just, and this is a question I think that comes up a lot after people watch the film, and we are usually in community together and people get very vulnerable and very open about like, oh, wow, I didn't know about this history, but now I do. So how do I stay present? How do I really stay present with the really regenerative, visionary, solutionary work that is unfolding right here? So what advice do you have to people who want to support, want to plug in? What can they
do? Well, one really fast way is check out the Ohlone curriculum. It's a free educational resource. It's dominantly catered to 3rd and 4th graders, but teachers as well. And then, like, learn about the native peoples of the territory. It's also my intention to update my website. I need help. I need help. I think I could do it all, but I can't. I'm a web designer and graphic designer, so I did the whole, I know this, I can do this. Woo! So that being said, I have these intentions. I'm looking for help to put a list of all the native peoples and organizations and websites and educational material up. And native approved content. There are books that are written by natives. There are books that are written by allies, advocates, accomplices. And there's a word that's really important, co-conspirators. That there are people who are active, that are wanting to be in solidarity with native peoples. I tend to have a problem with self-proclaimed allyship, because if someone proclaims they're an ally, or they proclaim that they are woke, we are in a state of waking. That word has been hijacked since, what is it, 80s, 70s, a little further back, by the Afro-American community, the Afro-futurisms. My brain is just like, indigenous futurisms. Wait, wrong community. Ugh. And so, one, don't hijack something when you don't know the history of it. Two, many of us are in this like sleeping dormant state, and a lot of cultural revitalization is waking up, and we are in a state of waking. So self-proclaiming woke is dangerous. Self-proclaiming allyship is dangerous. When the community calls you in, when the community acknowledges you, when the community claims you, that is when we are all connected. And so steps that we can take is honor truth and history, seek out being in right relation with the indigenous peoples, as well as the land. Listen to the land. Think about your watershed and think about your ecosystem. What is going on? And how is the land being acknowledged? What language territory are you in? Are there native peoples that are being consulted when it comes to the projects that are going on? Are you supporting businesses that are impacting environments negatively? Maybe we can start shifting some of our decisions. Are we supporting exploitation and destruction of the earth? Like, these are like indigenous teachings that we all can align with if we can't find the right opportunity to connect with the indigenous community of the land. Because, as I said, I know 2 Ramaytush relatives, and they are way overbooked. Not saying don't reach out to them, not saying don't talk to them, I'm just saying be patient and be kind, but also don't wait on them to tell you what to do. Ground yourself, and it's important that we become in charge of our education, like in charge of how we seek out truth in history, because our current Americentric Western colonial construct of education has not done due diligence, and the Western settler construct of conservation of land is stupid. Our forestry department is foolish, because that was just a tree farm. Our forestry department legit is a tree farm. And then the same thing when it comes to, well, John Muir conservation. He was racist. He wanted to kill all the native peoples because supposedly we weren't enterprising off of this resource. Many documents state that California was a golden Eden. It's a Garden of Eden. Yeah, because indigenous peoples tended and stewarded it. We managed the land with fire. We were ecologists, environmentalists, doctors. Like, why do we have to dismiss indigenous teachings and pedagogies and say Native American hunter-gatherer? And so when I say take steps to honor truth and history, like even our own self, our own communities, our own lineages. I'm mixed. I am attempting to honor my Euromut ancestry as well. And then I have a little bit of Mohawk and a little bit of Chumash that I also want to honor. I identify with my indigeneity because I want to celebrate it. But it's also important that we can celebrate who we are, and then how are we in community together now? How are we being good ancestors in training now? Is there a legacy that we are supporting? Because if we're just going to support a legacy of capitalism and consumeristic, materialistic nation, I don't want to hang out with that crew. So yeah, I
every time you say ancestors in training. Okay, Kanyon, so there are a few questions for you. LSN has asked, Kanyon, have you felt that the Asian American community have been co-conspirators for indigenous communities here?
I've had a lot of awesome interactions with some community members. There's some that I don't know, but then there's some that I feel like I'm in family. I've been lucky enough to participate in gatherings, like a lot of gatherings, like Gongster's Paradise at the center was so cool. I never knew anything about it, and I felt welcomed. And the same thing happens. Well, like when you say Filipinos, that community, I don't believe that community even has F.
King Philip. Oh, wait, that sounds like America. Because there was someone that America was named after. The same thing with Columbus Day, even though he never touched the United States. And the whole like discovery. And so like having these parallels, I was talking to a Filipino comedian at the Gongsters Paradise at the center, and we were just riffing off of each other, just giggling and laughing about the same parallels. And it was just beautiful. And so I feel lucky to be in community. And we can celebrate our indigeneity, our indigenous lineages from the land of our ancestors, wherever we are. And the same thing, we recognize that people of European descent still have indigenous lineages. However, they have been ripped from their earth-based spiritual practices a lot longer. Like indigenous communities, our wounds are 150, 200 years old, 500 years since Columbus got lost. That being said, the wounds are deep and the scars are heavy, and so, like people silencing their own people, religious indoctrination. So I feel lucky when I meet community that are proud of who they are and willing to connect. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like so many of us, I mean, I'm South Asian, I'm born and raised in India, and I came to the US, for grad school. And it just, and I'm making also a film right now back home. In fact, there's great news. So, I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is that this story is global, right? Colonization. And in the case of India, for example, we have become the colonizers after the British left. The dominant culture sort of took over. And we've had, I think like the horror stats are 60 million people were displaced in India after independence, for dams, for mining, extractive industries, and it continues. We just had a huge community youth-led victory in Mumbai, which is actually my next film, The Last Remaining Urban Jungle, in the biggest city in India, which is home to 10,000 indigenous peoples. They wanted to build this metro. And after years of organizing, the metro project was closed down. And so they're going to stop the tree cutting. And so it's a huge victory. But it seems like this design is similar. And there was something about the message that your mother so poetically says that, we suffer from nature deficit disorder, right? Nothing is sacred but money. But then she also says that our mother can shake us off if she wants to, which she has during these wildfires. Are literally mother shaking us off or waking us up, and yeah, so I just wonder what's coming up with you as a California native, long tradition of fire management and indigenous ecological knowledge, which was of course erased by the colonial governments in power. What do you feel this current moment is? What is the message of this current moment?
Well, it's time to wake up. It's time that we recognize that we as humans on Earth are not this superior being, that we need to be in community with all sacred living systems. Yea, we may have technological advancements, but at what cost? We've been divorced away from our indigenous pedagogies and our teachings. So we are creating things and not being responsible for the mess that we've created. So yay, we have these devices and we have these plastic items. However, we have plastic in the sea. Yay, we have awesome opportunity to have instant gratification. At what cost? The clean water is no longer clean. Like I was really blessed. Just it's been an exhausting week. However, I feel really blessed that I got to witness Kiss the Ground. It's a documentary. It just got put out in Netflix. I met the author of the book and the director, and I hung out with them, and I hung out with a woman who also was featured in it. So Kiss the Ground is talking about big agriculture and the patterns and how we need to care about the soil. And there's also a effort, the USDA NRCS is helping fund indigenous conversations. It's called Gather, the film.
And it talks about indigenous peoples, well, even breaking laws to be indigenous when it comes to gathering their cultural resources, gathering their original foods, sustaining themselves in a traditional fashion, breaking the rules just by being themselves, which it's always been illegal to be native. And so these times is we need to start realizing that these governing structures and these rules and regulations are great for keeping people in line and in order. However, they're not made to think for us or be accountable in any sense. Like, from as simple as our Constitution. Our Constitution ripped off the Iroquois Confederacy, the Iroquois Confederation, and it cherry picked. It literally cherry picked elements that it thought it was great. But the problem is it wasn't in right relation to the indigenous teachings and the indigenous way of democracy, that there are core elements. One, matriarchal society have final say. Patriarchal society are the decision makers. Yes, we can appoint leaders and have people be our voices and speak for them. However, if they're not doing their job, the aunties and the grandmas can take that strength away. They will no longer hold that position. How convenient that they didn't add that there because of forefathers. So in saying that, we need to rematriate the land. We need to recognize that we have a responsibility to the earth. And it's not about getting a good job, going to a good college, and finding a good partner. Because, some of our indigenous lineages were polygamous, polyandrous, and polyamorous. ACE, like LGBTQ community members are in all nations. So why do we have this heteronormative agenda going on? And why is that a priority? Why do we need to get married and have, the white picket fence? Why can't we have eco villages? Why can't we have gardens in our front yards? Who made the decisions and who made the rules? Why can't we have gardens in our front yards? Oh, profit industry. Oh, lobbyists. Oh, regulatory agencies. Oh, public standards and safety. How come Native peoples and Indigenous peoples were doing it since time immemorial? And the same thing with why things are the way they are now. Let's start talking about coming together and making intentional communities and breaking this system apart, because this isn't the way. This isn't the way. So, I told you I was going to say hi to this guy. This little guy is roaming Ohlone, and with the conversations that I have with him is this little accurately depicted Native figurine. Do you think Indigenous peoples were ever consulted when it came to their likeness or descriptions when it comes to logos or creations of the past? Like, do you think Indigenous peoples were ever consulted when it came to their likeness? And two, what does an ethical consultation element mean? Well, this little guy was created by a relative who danced with the Pajaro Valley Indian Council, the Amakatura dancers, and is in regalia because Native peoples don't wear costumes. He's carrying around a salik, one of the traditional instruments of the land, which is a clapper stick. And he takes pictures, kind of like Elf on a Shelf, but takes pictures and honors Native land wherever he goes. So on his social media posts, he'll acknowledge the language, territory, or the land, or even sometimes words if there's language revitalization happening in those areas. So his social media is busy on Instagram, hasn't been on Twitter lately, but has his own Twitter and on Facebook. And is just a way to talk about indigeneity and celebrating truth and history in a fun, unique way. Not trying to profit off of it, not trying to do anything crazy. Like, part of my mind's like, maybe we can make a little case for him, or not a case, a little replica, and make little seed bombs of California flowers or something, little seed bombs. But then I want to be sure the ecosystem wouldn't be impacted by invasive species. So that's gonna take a minute. So yeah, roaming Ohlone says hi.
Thanks, Kanyon. Anybody else would like to unmute and say anything? Anything on your mind? How are you feeling on Indigenous Peoples Day, which should be every day, all day? Golden Oak Montessori says, very appreciative. Thank you for a wonderful conversation, says Dana. We want to rematriate everything ASAP.
Yay!
Yeah. Well, it's 7 o'clock and we do have 10 more minutes or so. Kanyon does have to go to another screening. So Kanyon, do you have any parting words, or Akemi, Rachel, do you have any last questions for us?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any. I think a lot of my questions were questions that people posted to you. But again, like I just want to, express my gratitude again to you, Kanyon, and to you, Rucha. It's been a very long, busy day for both of you. And I know it's not over yet. So, yeah, I wanted to, encourage any people. We have links to the websites if you wanted to follow up on all of their work, or if you have any questions. If you're like me and you realize you have a question after the event is over, definitely, feel free to send it over to us, or you could just, reach out to the two of these phenomenal women directly. With that, I mean, I just wanted to maybe pause a little bit in case there was any last minute questions in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of appreciation and thank yous. So echoing that back as well. And then I think while we're waiting for any final questions, I think Rachel, if you can post our survey link as well. We would love to collect some of your feedback. It will help inform our future events. It really helps us out. It really does. So if you can take a few moments to really support that. We have links if you wanted to learn more and also donate to Indian Canyon efforts. The donation link is right there in indiancanyonlife.org. Or
It's on Facebook too.
On Facebook as well, yes.
Yeah. So the cool part is Coast-Nowinini Research, Indian Canyon, has 2 Facebook pages. Myself as the artist, Coyote Woman Creations, but Canyon Consulting is there. In the land of my ancestors, go like the page. You can find out where more is, or you can share your experience. You can tell people about it. You can announce to the world. It's really, really wonderful. Support it. Because there's sometimes, like on Facebook, it says, support a nonprofit or add it. Actually, I just added Coast-Nowinini Indian Research. If you know anyone who works at Google, or I have to look up this website, it's like Benefity or Benefit Charity something. If someone works at Google and they contribute, they want to donate to Coast-Nowinini Research. If they tell their boss, Google will match it. And I think this is common in a couple other Silicon Valley tech orgs. If it's on this website, your boss will double it, match your funds. So I need to look up the website again, but if you follow Coast-Nowinini Research on Facebook, I'll be posting it there. So yeah.
Yes, lovely. Thank you so much. I think Rachel posted up. I also want to shout out to Rachel, who's like being our wonderful program assistant, posting up all these links in the shadows. Thank you so much, Rachel, for supporting us there. And she did post. Yay! There you are. So I think without further ado, I want to be mindful of all of our time today, especially Rucha and Kanyon. Thank you so much for your energy, for all that you are doing and continue to do. Rucha, I'm very excited for your next film project. And I think there was a question in the chat about if there's any possibility of, follow-ups too in the land of my ancestors in the future. That'd be wonderful. And Kanyon, best of luck with your next engagement tonight and for all the days to come. Thank you so much.